Hello, everybody. So we are live now. We had some technical difficulties. That's the reason we are delayed. But here we are, and we're going to continue our discussion of the Wars of Light and Shadow series by Janny Wurts. And today we are going to discuss this fantastic book, Traitor's Not, which I really enjoyed. I have only a Kindle version. For some reason, I couldn't get a physical copy, but I have got it now. I have ordered it. It's on the way. So that's great because I want, even though I have a Kindle version, you should have the entire series on the shelf, right? So, we have our regular group of book buddies here, including Janny. So, a quick round of introduction. I'm sure it's not needed because my channel regulars will definitely know all of you, but still, Blaze, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Blaze from Under the Radar SFF Books. Been a longtime fan of this series, The Wars of Light and Shadow, and this is my first reread of the series. And Traitor's Not. There's so much great stuff to talk about in this one. And if you're one who loves action, if you like some darker parts of the fantasy, this book's for you, and I can't wait to discuss it.
Right. Peel.
Hi, I'm P.L. Stewart. Yep, I've read the entire series up until we're all waiting anxiously, of course, for the last book in the series. And it is my favorite series of all time, without question. Janny is my favorite author of all time, without question. I think we were just talking before we came on about Nico's amazing video regarding why you should read The Wars of Light and Shadow. It's a great video, Nico. It was awesome. And I'd like to echo everything that Nico said in that video, in that, this is a series that when a lot more people start catching on and realizing just how good this series is, as I always say, you talk about your Hobbs and your Jordans, etc., it is right up there and belongs with the best. So I'm so excited to be with these amazing people and just chat about Jenny's books because I love them.
Well, yeah, thanks for the video mention with it, but I've been meaning to make that for forever, and so I have finished everything up to that's out. Before this one, I was starting with the book per month or so, and then finally I just couldn't resist anymore, so I kept going. But yeah, Trader's Not was a ridiculously awesome book. And Janny kept telling us how much the pace was going to pick up. And it's not like I didn't believe you, Janny, for the record, but I just didn't expect it to be that much. This book, just everything was there. At Peril's Gate, the players are set up. We know what's going to be happening. And this book just runs with it. And it was almost like you're winded reading it because you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much happening. And in the best way. And so yeah, I enjoyed it. This is the best series that I've read. I said that in that video. I stand by that. I even had some people joking around because like, oh, gasp! Has it replaced Wheel of Time for you? Because I love I love Jordan and Hobb, and I've read Erickson and a lot of the other big ones, and I stand by my statement. So I'm excited to keep talking about this and the other books. So it's been a blast.
Right. So for me also, this book was, so the first part was something that I didn't expect because it was so much fun. There was so much humor. I mean, if you don't, I mean, obviously there are serious things happening, like this whole thing in the ship and the yachts and all that, but it was fun. It was not dark. But then the second half of the book, it's like, okay, wait a second. But there was not 1 minute of boredom, right? Throughout the book. I don't know if I'm getting more and more used to Janny's way of writing, that, this book was so easy for me to read through. I just flew through it. As compared to the other ones, because like I used to tell you, Janny, all the time that because I'm not a native speaker, it takes me time, but I didn't have any problem with this. Maybe I am growing in my ability to read, tough English books. But yeah, this was such a amazing book. I'm sure all of us have a lot to talk about it. Before that, Janny, do you want to give a quick, intro about the book, and what you want to, how you would like to introduce this book?
Some people actually started this book, the series here, because there was an overprint. When Misha Merlin went out of business, they owed me quite a bit of money. And so I inherited a truckload of books and I gave them to the art show at Dragon Con as a thank you to the staff. And the staff came back the next year and said, either they started the book, fell in love with it, and went back to book one immediately, or they read the whole thing and then went back to book one immediately, because unreliable narration, you're going to see the other angles anyhow. So if you want to just dip your toe in, this might be a way to do it. And I have provided some copies to certain people, so there may be some giveaways going around. But anyway, I think it goes faster because the pacing in Peril's Gate and the way I arranged the style, I actually did slow it down. The sentence structure in Peril's Gate is slower because there's so many introspective scenes in that, and there's so many things that occur in that book that are inner sensory and outside the envelope as far as direct experience. It was extremely hard to write, and the concepts that were being presented were very, very intricate and very intense. So I wanted the impact of that emotional experience and that level of awareness to come alive in the series, because that level of awareness is carried forward through the rest of the series. So Peril's Gate really was carrying about 9 levels, and there's about 12. So at this stage, it was freed to let the style run a little bit faster, no less complex, but a little faster. And the pacing picks up because it's engraved in your memory, everything you need to know to understand on all those levels what's going on. Whereas writing in Curse of the Mistwraith, all those levels are there, but you can't perceive them. And it's important to have enough of them show that in hindsight, you can reflect back and go, oh my gosh, it was there all along. So I had to do a real pick and choose what to show, how to show it, and how to present the unfolding so that when you do hit this volume, absolutely the pedal goes off. This is the one book where I started not having to go over old material from a new perspective. I never repeat material. I always give you a new perspective so that another piece of it opens up so you see the underpinnings. So each of the prior books, you saw prior events with more underpinnings showing. This book was no longer necessary, and that's why there's a timeline in it in case you had a break between reading to remind you of what went before. Because in this book, I didn't need to do any of that. You had all of that level defined. Now we're defining future levels that you don't know about at all and wouldn't have any ground to perceive. This finish of this arc and then arc 4 opens those up, but everything prior, you already have the information you need to know. So if that, does that explain it? I hope so.
%. Yeah, that's exactly how I looked at it, and I think it worked perfectly because it just feels like okay, you know everything, and like I love my slower books, and like the really long ones were some of my favorites personally because like Ships of Merrier, that combo is where I fell in love, and like there was a lot of action in there too. But there was just so much with characters, and then Peril's Gate, which has a lot of introspection, and not even just for the character that you'd expect either. You get it for others too. So fantastic. But then yeah, getting to this and just having it be so quick, it just like really ruddy and self-contained too. So I still feel like it'd be a little weird for people to start with this, but I could see it because they might be a little confused. But I mean, like, sometimes fantasy series throw you right in, and if you treated it like that, you could make it work, and it has that self-contained arc for sure. So
Yeah, it was so many things stuck out to me about this book. I think if I can name 5 things, one was forgive my pronunciation, the Cavalier, the cult. Like that was just like that, you know, to know how um, the depths of the evil that was actually going on within the world was like, okay, these are some pretty badass, terrible, things happening. That it's funny because a lot of people look at this book as a Lysier versus Erathon combat, essentially, if you break it down to brass tacks. But when you realize, you know how rich the world building is. When you realize there's so many other forces at play in this world, and the cult, they really brought that home for me, like hard. The second thing I wanted to comment was on some of the female characters in this book, and their just feistiness and the way they refuse to go along with anyone's agenda, and they were going to play their part, and nothing was going to stop them from doing that. So Jensa, Jarrett's daughter, was definitely a standout in that respect amongst the female characters, like, for sure. And Glendian, the wildcat, she was awesome. I loved her character. And so the women in this book are, and the fact that they were just so determined, and things that they were going to do, they were going to play a part, and no one was going to stop them. I love that aspect. Another aspect that I really, really, I said this will be came before we came on, is I'm sorry, but I love Selfin. He's one of my favorite characters in the whole series. Zelvin he is just so dynamic, and he's I think he's my favorite side character, other than the main cast with Arathon and Lysier and Dakar. He is so far my favorite side character. He is just amazing. So, anyways, those are just some observations I made from the series and this
Yeah.
book in particular.
For me, I actually, this was the book, like throughout the entire series, I hated Lysier, but this book, I couldn't just hate him, especially because the way he treated Selfin, especially because I was thinking, okay, he's done now. Like, there is doubt on his loyalty. So, like, what is he going to do? But I really like the decision that Lysier made. So somehow, for me, the most irritating person was Fion. Like, he was like what Dakar was for me in book 1 and 2. Like, just shut up. I just wanted to shut up. Right. So I had so much fun with the characters and the nuances, to see how Dakar has grown from this annoying person, even though is still drinking and women and all that. You still know, like, you cannot hate Dakar anymore. So that character growth, for me at least, for the Dakar, was like, it's amazing. And so for me, yeah, the story is amazing, but these characters, with each book, you get so attached to it. I don't know, at the end of the series, I'm definitely going to start reread. I think this is such a rereadable series. And and if it's going to be fun like this, I think this book was, in one word, if you ask me, even though with the dark arts like necromancy and all that, I still feel this was a fun book to read. This was like really fun. It stands out for me.
Yeah, it was fun, and as well, another one of my favorite characters, Davian. He really, now you get to see a lot more of his personality, and I absolutely love those morally gray. You don't know really what side he's supposed to be, a fellowship sorcerer. He's rogue. Like, I love his character, and I love the banter between he and Erathon. I love to see people who are, these are two people who are intellectually, right, superior, and when they play against each other, I just, yeah, I love those interactions. That was fabulous.
Davian is definitely, he's not so much rogue, but he goes to the beat of his own drum, especially with the other fellowship sorcerers in like in the world. There's a method to his madness, and madness he might be a little bit of, but that's that's a conversation for another time. When you like in hindsight, and I'm not getting into spoilers right now, but in hindsight, when you're looking back on this book and you start to see the pieces and how they're connecting and what the main purpose was of what Davian is doing for Arathon, for other places, it'll all make sense. You don't see it right now, but I love Davian's interactions. And yeah, I 100% agree with you, Paul. Sulfin, this is Sulfin's book, hands down. And if you don't like Sulfin after this one, I'm not sure we're reading the same series anymore because he, especially from the first chapter, and we'll get into the spoilers of that. But I just can't get enough of him. What he goes through, the decisions he makes with Lysair, and how that all culminated. It's just beautiful, and at the same time, it's building up to what the final book in the arc, Storm Fortress, is. But we'll get all into the goodies.
Yeah, there's so many. Kind of touching on what a couple people have talked about with just characters that you change your mind on, and because it's something that it can happen. And I've read other books where I'm like, oh, I hate this character, and everybody's like, oh, you're gonna actually really like them later, and I'm like, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Um, and it's just like the only other thing I can think of where I was as surprised that I ended up liking a character was somebody from the Life Ship Traders, from by Robin Hobb. There was a character I detested, and then I ended up appreciating them. Still didn't really care for them that much though. But Janny would take characters and introduce them, and just as you learn more about them, make it so that like you can't not like them. I was so with you, Angie, though, on Theon, just being obnoxious because he's, an annoying teenage boy who thinks he knows everything, which is completely realistic. Janny and I joke back and forth about it, and I'm like, oh no, I hate him because he's totally a realistic person. That's why he annoys me. He's a really well written character, almost too well. Um, but in the things you get to with Lysair, which I feel like there were some small and big moments in the last book and then in this one where you just start really looking at him and you're like, man, I still don't like you, but it's starting to be harder to blame you and hate you. And Sulfin, from when he was first introduced, never would expected that to be a character that people absolutely love, and that's so instrumental to a lot of different things. So it's just um, that's where, I mean, when someone's introduced or when something happens, it's just, yeah, you always got to pay attention because so many things are incredibly relevant. And like all of that, I mean, going back all the way to what Fugitive Prince is where Sulfin was introduced, and even at that point, like he's not even really like a character in that book. Like he's there, but we're not really introduced to him as a character until the next book. And it's just like you would have thought like, oh yeah, this is just a throwaway, that this is what happened. And no, it's like setting up somebody who's going to be a beloved character surprisingly. And so yeah, I always just impressed at the characterization for main characters, for the side characters, for even people that we see maybe once in the series, still have a surprising amount of character. Um, I think that was when you were talking about what's to come in the next book, which is fair. I'll do the Janny though, because I now completely understand all of the struggles that she's gone through trying not to reveal things.
Yeah, it really is the brilliance of Jenny that, and when an author does that, Sulfur was just the captain, the unnamed kind of captain that survived, the Grimoire, and he was that sole survivor. But Jenny, what I love about Jenny's work is that people who say that it's dense and it's thick and there's so many characters and there's so many plots, but you can care and be interested in all of them. You latch on to all of them and you start wondering, well, what happened with this person? What's this person doing? And where are they going? And how are they going to fit in? And that's part of Jenny's brilliance, that all of her characters matter. They all play a role, and the role may seem small, even in infinitesimally small at points, But then the scope just was like, wait a minute, they're a key cog in the wheel, right? If they didn't do this, then this wouldn't happen, then this wouldn't happen, then this, like, that's what I love about Jenny's writing, that all her characters matter. There's no such thing as just a throwaway side character, as Nico indicated, and that really. And as for Lysier, I'm probably one of the few that's always liked Lysier, has always had like sympathy more than anything for who he was. I know, all the way along. He reminds me of another. I think because he reminds me of my own main character in a lot of ways. They share a lot of similar traits, and that's probably Janny actually hooked me on this series with Lysier rather than Erathon, because I always loved the very messed up, flawed, someone like Lysier who had some parent issues, again shares a lot in common with my main character, and someone who it was somewhat insulated by privilege to a degree, again, like Janny Lysier spoke to me, and he has throughout the series, and I find his arc to be fascinating. And even when you hate him, there are moments when you're forced to understand where he's coming from, and that trait, that high king trait of justice that he is granted. One thing with Lysier, where I see it the same way I see with Erathon, that the compassion, it is also, these traits are a blessing and a curse at the same time. They are a trap for both of these half brothers, right? And they can't help it. They are naturally imbued with these gifts, and they manifest, but it drives them and it shapes who they are. And Lysier's justice, again, it is his strength and his weakness, but I understand it, right? And the more I read, the more I read the books, and when I got to up to the end of where we are in the series, the more I wait till you read the last few books. You're going to feel different about Lysier, I think. And I know Angie, who can't stand Lysier in general. Even Angie may, as she's noted, she may start to feel a bit different about him.
Yeah,
Right.
even
I
if
mean,
you don't
my
love him.
concern with Lysier is that, um, I mean, both Arathon and Lysier, they are constrained by this curse, but Arathon has the ability, I don't know, somehow he can think beyond that and, try to break out of it. And he's trying, but Lysier is not even trying. And that's my problem with him. He's like, no, this has to be done. Like, and there are a lot of people around him sometimes hinting, and maybe because of this curse, you are compelled to do it. No, like, no, this is justice, right? So that's my, sometimes, justice is like, I mean, I think compassion trumps justice.
But beyond that, as Janny always points out, Lysier's not trained as essentially a master sorcerer,
Oh yeah, of
and
course, of
and
course.
and, and Erathon is. And I think if you want to, for me, I know there's a lot more than that. There's a lot more reasons that, but for me, if I can hone in on one thing with the two of them, is the difference with upbringing and training, right? And Lysier is almost like someone who, yeah, you gave him the keys to the Corvette, but he doesn't have a driver's license, right? And he takes it and he runs with it. But Erathon is like a Formula One racer, and he knows what to do with, and even the things he doesn't know, he's able to he's gleaned enough from his background. I can figure this out. I can I can, and he just keeps growing in power because he has a trade. Lysier seems sometimes like he's going backwards in how he uses his powers to me, but yet his awareness, as he's humbled with every loss, I think that starts to help him grow as a person and with his own abilities, right? So, anyways, sorry, I'm chatting too much there.
I can tell you really love this book, Pew.
What gave you the hint?
It's a great book.
You know what? I think this might be the first fantasy series which I have read and I've never rated or even attempted to rate the books or rank the books. Like I don't know where to start. Like I have to
I
reread it, I think.
I know that for me, and I haven't finished all my reviews of the books yet. I've reviewed up to a certain point. Um, the hardest thing, you're so right. The hardest thing about this series, Angie, is that how do you say that one book is better than the other? You may have a favorite, but they're all so stellar, and not just are they all stellar within themselves, like self-contained. Like as a series, it's my favorite series. Like so, I mean, it's so hard to assess how good one book is versus the other because every book is so amazing. And then you have to. It comes down to I think personal. Just what's my favorite, right? You know, which one or which one. You know, maybe a book where okay, maybe this character got a comeuppance or you know like it's much more about personal taste for me rather than trying to objectively evaluate well which book was technically better. I feel like you know these books are all some of the best books I've ever read in my life, right? And I'm 54 years old. They're all amongst the best books that I've ever read in my life. But so when you're trying to think okay which of all these best books I've ever read in my life is better than like that's a real hard delineation to make. So, but if I had to, like, if I was pressed, then you know, so you have to pick one. You know, I actually like, I'm kind of on the fence between Peril's Gate and Storm Fortress, but I think that's where I would have to lean. But this is close. This is close.
And one more added layer on top of that, because when I finished up to book 10, and I did my initial rankings, going over the reread, my rankings changed, and they'll continue to change the longer you reread. For example, Fugitive Prince, the first time I read it, was down, but now it's towards the top, just because I have the understanding of what is in that book and what ramification has later in the series. And Traitor's was not on my top, but now it is. It'll keep changing just based on your perspective. That's the beauty of the series. Like it's so this and like maybe a couple other series are the only ones I've actually reread. It takes a lot for me to want to reread a series because I want to be surprised again, to catch things I didn't catch. And as you maybe you started the story when you weren't like ready for it. Like I probably wasn't 100% ready to start the series, but as I grew through the reading of it, I gained more perspective, and just going back to it, I'm like, oh my god, I have such a better mindset for this now, and I know like what to look for and stuff like that. So it changes, and look forward to it as you get there.
Yeah, I can't even. I've just been like my first favorite book was Ships of Marrier, and then like every book after that, it's like my usually I feel like my favorite Janny Wurts book, especially from the series, is whichever one I read last. No matter which one I've just read, because like it is, oh, it's so hard to pick favorites because I've enjoyed all of them. They're all fantastic, and then a lot of them are for different reasons, too. Like the different things that just made me really love this particular book or this particular arc, and so yeah, that's difficult trying to choose. But yeah, I've been wanting to reread since book two. I've been feeling like, oh, I just want to go back, and so I don't know exactly when, but I will definitely be rereading probably sooner than I should. Um,
No such thing as sooner than you should, man. Do
I
it.
know. I
Do
know.
it.
It's one of those things. I used to reread Wheel of Time like annually because I've been reading that series for like I don't know, over almost 20 years. I've been reading the series, and I started when I was younger. I reread it every year, and it has reread value. Maybe not that much reread value. That was a little excessive, I will admit. But then I'm just like, I started realizing like, oh, there's just like tons and tons and tons of books, and so I'm like, I should stop doing that and get some more. And so I I still like to reread, but I try to reread less now because there's so many new things that I need to get to. And so this is going to be the new series, though, that I'm always struggling not to just start rereading for sure. Because I just, every time I think about it, I want to just start it over and read it some more. And so,
Yeah. I think for me, rereads, it's something I do periodically, but it's something I do obviously like you too, Nico, with only select series, like my top 5 of all time, right? Because as you said, there's so many new books I want to read. But and the scary thing about this series is that this isn't so there isn't one single book in this series that is my favorite book of all time. My favorite book of all time is actually Janny's standalone book, which is To Ride Hell's Chasm. So for me, but in terms of series, this is the longest series that I will reread. My other top series like Traitor Sun Cycle by Miles Cameron, the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell, The Lord of the Rings, a lot of those other series. Yes, of course I'm going to reread them, but I don't know how much, and I'm not. This isn't a slight on any of those authors. They're fabulous authors, and the books are amazing. I don't know if I will rediscover as much. I'm sure I'll rediscover a lot of things, but when I reread The Wars of Light and Shadow, I'm sure it's going to totally change my viewpoint on so many things. And there's so few series I think you can say that about. Like you take all this stuff in, and you're so immersed, and you're so into the books, but then you realize I've missed about 70% of what's really going on. Like, how many series can you say that about, right? So I know that when I reread these books, and I plan to reread them next year, I know that I'll be like, how the hell did I miss that? Right? So that's because even sometimes when in book reading, like reading the book for the first time, and I go back because I'm trying to get clear, I was like, wait a minute, like how the hell did I miss that? Right? And that's the feeling that I think I'm going to get in a good way when I do my reread of this series.
yeah.
You'll be shocked how much you miss just in Curse. You'll be shocked.
It isn't a case of you miss it on purpose. It's a case of that your focus deliberately was set elsewhere. Your focus was either where the characters didn't know what was happening, or it was what you thought was the important contour, what you believed was the important thread, until the rug gets ripped out from under you. So when you go back, now you have a different set of important threads, and that shifts everything. And the other thing that was built into this series is if you read it every decade of your life, it's going to shift focus also, because it was designed to be timeless in that way too. So you wouldn't go back and go, oh, the magic's gone out of this book now. Every decade of life experience that you gain is going to shift the focus of what you think is important on the page, and it becomes a whole new story.
I would have to agree. I think the one thing that I'm realizing about Janny's writing too is that, and I've only read Ride Hell's Chasm and all the books in this series up until the end, waiting, of course, for that final book. That I literally think I could reread this for a lifetime and I'd still miss things. And that's not because Janny didn't write this book in a way that you should be able to see everything. It's just that it is so immersive, and there's so many things you could see, and the human brain can only process so much, right? And I know for me, part of the reason why is that there's sometimes I am just so friggin' giddy about the prose. I'm just so taken aback. Like, I read a passage, it's like, it's not fair. No one should be able to write like that. It is not fair, right? I don't know if any of you have had that feeling when it's like, no one should be able to write like this. It just, the beauty of the language. Everybody knows my partner on Maybe to this page just like to tease me that I'm always, PL's a prose snob, right? And he's big on his prose, his lyrical, poetic prose or whatever. Like, I mean, yeah, and that's why I am addicted to Janny's writing. but yeah, like sometimes I think why I miss things is because I just get stupefied like by the prose. It's like a kid in a candy store, and you're yes, that cool. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It ought to be illegal. Yeah. Yeah. I said before I'd give my left arm to be able to write like Janny. And yeah. So sometimes I think I miss things because I'm just so like, oh my gosh, that sentence was beautiful. And then, you know, and then I keep reading and then I go back. Oh, but I didn't get that. So then I go back. And I think that's another reason why sometimes I miss things. But that's not a bad thing at all.
It was just and my mind immediately went to that blurb because that fits so well. But yeah, rereadability is definitely, for me, since I enjoy rereading, is definitely something that I take into account with rating a favorite as well. Because if I read a series and I absolutely love it, but it's not really anything that I'm probably going to want to reread because it's not really conducive to that, that's going to lower it a bit. But yeah, this is a series that I know I will reread for the rest of my life and be happy doing it. So
Before we get into this spoiler section, I want two things for this series, and I think it has to be somehow triggered from the fan community. One is that we need a much more comprehensive wiki page for this. We have to expand it somehow. I'm not an expert in it, but you know, this the Peravia wiki we have, I think we should expand it and have like more synopsis and plot summary and character description, like you know, the Wheel of Time have. That would be awesome. I think it'll add to the attraction also, that okay, you have this wiki, so you know, people, it definitely adds value, I think. And secondly is that we should somehow push for more and more with the publishers for audiobooks, because I think this would be wonderful, like if we have audiobooks.
As far as the wiki goes, when Brian did it, he asked for help from the fan community. He pleaded and begged for help from the fan community, and nobody assisted him. Not one person. So Brian Urey deserves a trophy for doing that entire thing, spoiler-free, volume by volume, a complete labor of love. And I think if you were to go to him and say, I want to add this or I want to add that, he would probably be crying happy, because he pushed through and did it on his own. And I have to hand it to him that we have a wiki at all. But by all means, fan community, stand up and roar, because one thing that happens in the latter part of this series, people read through it and it's so hard to say anything because it's spoilery. They just go mute. And there's very little information on the ground with what happens in this series after Peril's Gate. It practically vanishes. The reviews go down, and it's not because it's disappointing people. It's because it's so hard to talk about. So more of that would certainly help. And I know Brian would be grateful if anyone has something they want added to the wiki. He would be grateful. Now, each new book has a timeline. I think Arc 4, I didn't bother because of the way the reset of the way it starts didn't require it. But the finale definitely does have a timeline. So the final volume will, but don't read in a volume you're not in, because it will spoil, because it will cover what happened in events before. Also, the glossaries are tailored. If you stay in the glossary that's to the book you're reading, it will only spoil up to the previous volume. So I reset the glossary at the start of every book. So that glossary continues to grow, and there are more things in there than you would have seen, say, for the same definition in Curse of the Mistwraith. It may not be the same definition anymore. It may be updated, it may have shifted focus, or it may have more depth, or it may have more dates in history. So to answer your question on the wiki, help, we would love it. And if you need anything else, make your wishes known, and it could possibly be made to happen. I can't control what the publisher does. The only thing that's going to change their mind is pressure from the readership at this stage, I would think. But I'm not in their office. I don't know. I know we just had the editor leave, so I've got a brand new editor who is coming in not knowing anything. And the senior editor for the department just went out on maternity leave. So it's practically a whole new team handling this, and they haven't a clue. So it's up to us to let them know what they have.
I'm now wondering if I should be comparing glossary entries book to book. Um, because I'm like, are you hiding things in there, Janny? Is there some secret stuff I'm gonna see if I
Great,
look?
great.
They're Easter eggs. They're Easter eggs. Yeah, I'll add a little fill-up of back history or a little bit of this or that. Not always, but each glossary has its own little cachet to it because I go through the whole thing and I revise it.
And the great thing about Traitor's Knot is in the back there's a storyline of things that happened so far. So it was a good refresher if you need it going into it, which I very much enjoyed my first time around. So it's all there in the updated glossary, and book by book going forward, it'll be updated. So
You know what's
Yeah.
also great? Sorry, go ahead, Angie.
No, I think we if we are creating something like that, we should be like it's most important thing to keep in mind is spoiler, because for Wheel of Time, oh my god, the number of times I got spoilers, like just looking at character names. I was so angry so many times. Like, who did this? Because the first line is, "This is so and so who will be the wife of so and so in like book 10 or something." I'm like, don't tell me that already.
That's
That's
awesome.
totally one. I always just tell people, I'm like, just ask me, and I will make sure not to spoil you. And like, if I don't remember, I've got the encyclopedia. I'll look it up and
Wow.
answer your question on spoiler because that's really common, unfortunately. That's why it's so great that the previous site does have a lot of controls where you can be very specific on spoilers. So a lot of care taken to make that work well.
Hey, maybe we need a Janny Wurts Wars of Light and Shadow encyclopedia, compendium, something like that. That might be awesome.
I'd buy it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just think it would be such a great companion to the series, especially for those people who are reticent to like, okay, I'm going to get in there and I don't have all this reference material. Well, no, there's an encyclopedia. One thing I was going to quickly comment, I know it's kind of aside from the books, like this edition is beautiful, like all of these, but this one has a biography, a proper biography of Janny at the back of the book. And obviously I'm privileged to know Janny, but it's so nice to hear more about her as a writer and her talking about her work. And I just want to read this quote from the biography. It says Janny of her work. I choose to frame this story against a backdrop of fantasy because I can handle even the most sensitive issues with gloves off, explore the myriad angles of our troubled times with the least risk of offending anyone's personal sensibilities. The result, I can hope, is an expanding journey of the spirit that explores the grand depths and rises to the challenge of mapping the ethereal potential of an evolving planetary consciousness. That is a wonderful quote from the writer herself. So I'm just so glad they included that in here.
I think I mentioned this in last discussion, or I don't know if I did, but I would call this series a philosophical fantasy. It's like a new genre for me. Like definitely there is philosophy. That's the takeaway. I think if you don't, I mean, for different people might take away different things, but but there will be something for you to philosophically enlighten you, and that's what happens, especially. Um, I think it really started with me for Fugitive Prince and Peril's Gate, and now Traitor's Knot. It really started with Fugitive Prince for me. Like, okay, this is just more than an epic fantasy. It's much more bigger than that. And there is so much to take away from this.
Yeah, I haven't finished. I've only started the one book, but I started. I read Prince of Nothing. That series. Another Canadian author. It's funny. That series is supposed to be one of the most deeply philosophical fantasy series, and R. Scott Bakker, and it is very dark, extremely dark, brilliant. But yeah, I think and I obviously I've only read the first book, so I can't really comment on the series. But other than that, no series has touched me in terms of made me think about all these themes, right? Forced me to look at how I think about so many concepts. Like this series, Janny doesn't get enough credit for three things, and she doesn't get credit for enough credit for a lot of things. But for me, three things. You hit the nail on the head, Angie. Excuse me. The philosophical aspect. Two, the her prose, and even though people know that her prose is like, I'll tell you, man, there's, find me the writers that write more complete prose. Yeah, and maybe I'm just not well read enough, but for me, she's and three, and I said this last night on a podcast I was on. She does not get enough credit for her battle and action scenes. She does not. She should be talked about with the Evan Winters and the Miles Christian Camerons and the Bernard Cornwells, whatever. When Janny writes a battle scene, she gives you the build up, and boy, when it hits, it just knocks you out emotionally, and you're on the edge of your seat. Like Janny does not get enough credit for how she writes battle scenes specifically. So just wanted to plug that in there.
I'm just immediately taking that quote, PL, and putting that into a Discord that loves Baker and that are all super interested in Janny. Somebody over there's read the whole thing that they binged. But I know that they're just going to get mad at me because they're like, dang it, we were already getting started and now they're going to be even more excited. So immediately have to post about those.
That's awesome.
Do we get into spoilers now?
Yeah. Bring it on.
Right on.
Please.
All right. So, there you go.
Can we talk about the ending? I know we're going back.
Don't read it before you go to bed. The last chapter.
Wow.
You'll lie awake all night with your eyes pinned open.
Okay,
I
so
did.
I'm just trying to put this in perspective here. Okay, so because this is all, so much of this book is about the Kralaver, and I think it was Chibipo that put up that comment. Yeah, they are scary as hell, right? They're scary as hell, and this is another one of those examples when you realize, holy shit, Airthrone's pretty powerful, right? And he doesn't. This is the thing that got me the whole thing, and I had to reread it. I don't know, 3, 4, 5. I read that last, 40-30% 3 or 4 times. So what I read, and I didn't, and this again, I didn't realize it at first. He destroyed them because he thought he actually touched basically the Paravians. He basically grasped onto the Paravian and the Paravian presence that was in the tunnel, the Kenworth tunnel, right? That's how he destroyed them, right? And it's like, whoa, like this is like, I don't know if how many of you watched The Matrix. It's like that feeling of like, ooh, we're starting to realize just how powerful Airthon is. Like this is beyond, like the power keeps escalating as he taps deeper and deeper into his talents. And wow, like that whole thing, like when he got his arm cut open, I'm like, oh, and it's just, yeah, it was it was a crazy ass ending. And then that moment of, yeah, it was like in if you watch Game of Thrones, that thing where, okay, well, if you kill the White Walkers, then the whites, the ones that turn them, and then he freed, Arathon freed all of the people who are under the spell of the Kralaver by killing the masters. Like, wow, Janny, like, holy moly, that was crazy. Amazing.
Did you catch the slight thing? If you go back now into Peril's Gate, what the trigger was for Davien to leave Kiwar in Peril's Gate? So everybody misses it, but it's right on the page. It's one thing to watch for when you reread. It was when Lysair, when his priest did the scrying and did the blood magic, and one drop of blood hit the ground. That is what triggered Davien to come out of hiding. Wow. He started taking an active role at that moment. And so I always say to people, watch for the trigger, but the focus isn't on that, it's on something else, and so it slides right by, even though when you read it right on the page, you'll see that second. You'll see that shift. If you reread, you will see that moment where Davian comes out of his retreat.
And it's all because of the fact that you gave me the shorts, Janny. I was so honored and going back and understanding Davian's desire to stop the cults. That's what really, yeah. It's all right.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's just like, yeah, the ending scenes that was brutal. And I mean, the only thing I can think of to compare it to is I read a book where a character literally dies and goes to literal hell, and that was about the closest thing I could think of in comparison. I'm not going to say what that is because that would be a spoiler for that book. But I mean, like that is the only thing that my mind was like comparing it to, just because. I mean, it was. I mean, it was brutal, but it was just so like visceral, and it was one of those things where like something is almost certainly going to happen. Like he's going to somehow get out of this, but it doesn't even matter because at this point, it's what he's going through is like for him worse than death. I mean, and so it's if you can still get those emotions, even even in the series where assuming that the main character is not going to be killed, it's still like getting those emotions, which Janny always does, is gets those emotions. But man, it was rough. It just really was really rough seeing it, and then the backlash of it, and the fact too, I thought it was very beautifully done because none of even the sorcerers, none of the seven, they have no idea that of what happened in Cooler Tunnel. They don't know, and so they legitimately think that he is going to die, and it's very believable because there's nothing that they can do. And they you see them go from, oh, he must have a plan, this is going to be okay, to like, what is he doing? It's going to be too late soon. He needs to call for help or we're not going to be able to do anything. And they're like, he's dead. Like he's too late. There's no way. And just watching that, even them, the fellowship, is so high in their, things they think they can do, and then just like seeing hope die for them, where they're like, what the hell do we do now? There's nothing we can do. And then seeing that just like catharsis of them realizing what's happening and the utter shock of how it's happening and how they had no idea. It's just like you go on that roller coaster with them, and so it really allows you to experience that whole range of emotions as it's happening as well, and just makes it hit even harder.
One thing about the ending was just as close to like this Traitor's Knot is Janny, and this is the beauty of Janny being able to. I believe she can write in any genre out there, but this is as close to like a grimdark novel as I've read from Janny. Like that ending was just brutal. But the with the necromancers, it goes back to the beginning of the book where all of a sudden the action picks up and you realize, oh my god, Lysair is probably almost going to die, and he's being like controlled and he's by these necromancers, and then what happens with Sulfin. But it goes back to the Alliance of Light, and how Lysair is being propped up as like this savior, like on the pedestal, but in the background, he's actually he's not being controlled, but he's being heavily influenced, and the necromancers are doing that to him, and you realize the ramifications of it. The hints are all there. I think Jen and I talked about this before. Like, some readers, when they pick up Treasure, they were morally shocked that there was so much necromancy in the series, but there's hints of it in this arc going for that. And so, and like the dark parts, especially in like the first chapter of where Sulfin, where he needs to go to stop this big threat, and then that carries on through the whole book, and then the ending on the ultimate decision for Arathon and how he kills the Necromancers was just, oh, it was just from beginning to end. It was just amazing to read, and dark. It made me shiver a couple times, to be sure.
Oh yeah, and I think that really hit on an important theme for me when I read it is that, and Blaze, you said that so well, that the dangers of a cult type religion or even religion in general. I'm not picking on any religion. I'm just saying that I always say that religion is the trappings around faith. Your faith is sacred. What you believe, your relationship with your deity or deities, but the religion it's man-made. It's the trappings, it's the hierarchy, it's the clergy, and they often have their own agenda, right? Meanwhile, penitents are thinking, I'm faithful to this god or gods, and in this case, it's an avatar, it's Lycia, but and he's obviously a flawed human as well. But meanwhile, the trappings around, or they have their own program. They're doing their own thing. They are part of a cabal, an evil, cabal of necromancy, and they're running wild, doing their stuff, and nobody's picked up on that because they think that they're acting on behalf of like the people on the ground. I think, of course, they're acting on behalf of the Avatar, on behalf of the Lord of Light, Lycia, and just shows you the danger of when the people who run a religion, that they're human and subject to human flaws and faults. In this case, subject to take over by neck evil sorcerers. But like I said, that theme really hit home for me, and Blaze said that so well that because the Lysier is almost an unwitting, he is an unwitting pawn to what's been built up in his name, right? So and I love that theme. I love what Jenny did there with that. So
Yeah. And I said with this one, it does feel almost like the huge uh, focus on necromancy in this book. It feels almost like it should feel like it came out of nowhere until you, but I mean, like, even like you think for a second, you're like, oh no, yeah, this makes perfect sense. But it's just like such like an epic, like, let's do it, that it's just it kind of has that feeling of like, oh, this feels new, even though it's been there have been the small mentions, notes, and hints, and then it's gotten progressively more and more obvious with it, including in, Peril's Gate, where we start to really see it clearer and know. But there's been such the focus, and even now, even after reading this, we're still at the small hint stage for some more things to come involving necromancy, which I'm just teasing you, Angie, at this point. So, but and it was I kept thinking, and it was one of those things, like, I had some suspicions, and thinking about how it is crazy how far back some of it goes, all of the things that I caught, and then all of the things that I didn't, after finding out some more stuff later on, just in general, is always fun. But yeah, there was this book was just was pretty nuts. And I flew through this, and the last few I tried to take my time, and I struggled to take my time because I just I didn't want to put the books down. And so yeah, it's kind of a race to the finish from this point, while still, very much being the same beautifully written, complex books. It's just there's so much going on now because we've had everything set up, and so such a blast.
Yeah, I feel like this backbencher, like a person in class who sits in the backbench, who is like not a top performer. I feel like that because usually the teachers' pet always they come prepared, like they study 3 chapters in advance and they know everything, and I am the one in the backbench, like no clue what's going to happen, and all three of you come with all this knowledge from the future books.
I tried to resist. I really did. I was so tempted to just binge the rest after every live show we did. So technically, it's your fault, Angie, for the record. So thank you. Um, it's I was reading the series anyway with these live shows. It made me really keep up on it. And then yeah, it's just every time we talked about it, I get so excited. So that's why I've tried to be careful because I feel bad leaving you as the last one who's not read the whole thing now. But I'm just like it was a big time commitment, but it was worth it. So, and it's
It's
really
really
fun
fun.
seeing
See,
you kind of go through the first time and do things and theorize and how many things we agree on still.
So I wanted to ask you guys, didn't Asandir's warning to Sulfanevand register? Because, spoiler territory, Sulfanevand was the one who salvaged Lysair from being taken over, being used as the tool of this cult. But Asandir's advice to him was honest. He said, walk away and be free, go now. And that didn't prepare you for that final. So it's the case of it's right on the page, but you're focused on something else and maybe you miss it. I don't know how that warning, Asandir's warning, hit you the second time through, Blaze.
Asandir's warning to Sulfin, and for you guys watching, this is after Sulfin takes his vow with the to become the Lyser's Cathian, and he goes to the tower to talk to Asandir to take his final words to make it solidified. His warning and their like interactions, the first time I honestly didn't register as much as it does now. The ramifications, what he needs to go through to basically save Lysair from everything that he's going through, and protect him from himself, protect him from outside influences, and put the ultimate check on him. Because as we know, the Cathian has responsibilities beyond just protecting the king and being his advisor. He's now part of like but he's part of the law of major balance. He's part of the land. He will do whatever needs to be necessary to protect that, which is kind of like the get, pull, and take because Lysair, he rejected the fellowship's plea for redemption. So he's outside of the protection of the fellowship. He deals directly with the Paravians. That's another wrinkle that I just wanted to add in there. It hit me hard, and just thinking back to what Sulfin goes through, turn away, and what Arathon goes through. It's just yeah, it hit me harder the second time.
The warning hit me hard the first time because, and I said it in previous live streams that we did. I was after we got a couple books previous to this. Blaze again said it so aptly. The role of the captain, it was really up front and center. And as soon as I realized what was happening, and that Sulfan's going to do this, I'm like, don't do it. It doesn't end well for Gethys. They're good, you know what I mean? But I understand it's important that he does it. He's going to save lives doing it, not just Lysias. But at first I'm like, oh my God, don't do it. And then so I was hanging on every word that was going on in the interaction with the tunnel. But just the fact that Sulfan availed himself, was willing to avail. Remember, Lysias has rejected at every opportunity. He's rejected absolution from the Paravians. He's rejected, the fellowships, grace. He's rejected. He said, and yet, and this is where, I love the convergence of this dichotomy that Lysias has rejected all this stuff because it's magic, and yet he's in the hold of necromancers, right? Like, think about that, right? Like he said, no, sorcery is evil. I refuse to align myself with these dark, but yet look where he is, right? But anyways, yeah, I was very much on that, and I was like, when Sulfan got that warning, and you know how much I love Sulfan, I'm like, because I figure if someone's going down, it's not Lysias, it's Sulfan, because I figure Lysias is gonna make it, and Sulfan's gonna sacrifice himself. That was so. As soon as I was like, I was like, because again, I love the character, so no, I very much saw that word, but I didn't think it was gonna blow up in quite the way that it did. Obviously, I couldn't have foreseen that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's another thing that goes back to show you how long and how well the events and the necromancy was set up, because the whole thing against magic to begin with, and how it's kind of brought up that, like, well, yeah, the necromancers are very happy to have all their competition removed, and so, like, maybe some of that did come from Lysair to begin with, which with a natural distrust of it, but at the same time, it was something that's been nurtured the entire time, even before we got to the level that we were and done. And I mean, there was, what was it? Was it Fugitive Prince, where we had the soldiers that were put to sleep by the forest, and then the necromancer shows up um, to the sick house. I'm trying to remember which book that was.
I think that was Grand Conspiracy, if I remember correctly.
Okay, I was right
Grand
around there.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, and just another thing that's clearly showing that, yeah, there are necromancers around, and they have very real power as well. And so, like, there were so many things and bits and pieces in there, and it's just like I said, I can't wait to find all the ones I missed too. But there was so many things just showing and setting it up, and it's just, yeah, there's just yeah, okay. And it was Seth here. That's right. Okay. I was trying to remember. Wait, going back, I didn't plan to talk about that. It just popped into my head. I was trying to go back, but yeah, that's the part I was talking about. So yeah, so there's so much there, setting it up, and then yeah, Sultan, and that's where I agree with kind of what you said earlier, Blaze. Is like, reading this book, I don't know how you cannot feel for Sultan, just because of everything that he goes through, and it's just another thing where you wouldn't expect to get so much out of that character when starting, and really, really also makes you look at Lysair harder too, because it's somebody who's that devoted to him, who's seen him at his worst, and he's one of the few who's not blinded by him being the Avatar. He sees him for him, flaws and all, and is still just cares that much and just trying to go and help him, even at risk to himself. And some really just beautiful moments there.
Just one more thing to add on top of that. So, with regards to Lysair and Sulfin and what he had to do to get Lysair out of the necromancer control, this wouldn't have happened if Lysair did not reject the Fellowship's plead for resolution. Because if they did, he would be inside the laws of major balance. What does that mean? It means that your free will cannot be affected. The Fellowship would have no choice but to intervene, because he's outside of that. The Fellowship can't intervene. So it opened the door for the seed for this to happen in Fugitive Prince. So that's the build up for that. And then Sulfin, like the ritual that he had to go through with the Bidar knife, which not going to go down that road, but let's just say that. And what basically what he has to do to protect Lysair from the outside influence. It's another wrinkle that just keeps coming around, and I didn't fully understand that the first time. I mean, I kind of did, but this just completely looking back on it, I was like, it was all set up, and it's just wonderful. There's so many hints the second time around when you're reading a series that you'll catch on like this, and it'll just bring a smile to your face, like it's did for me throughout this journey.
Yeah. I want to quickly, if we can, I want to talk about, I mentioned before about some of the things that really, really stood out for me in this amazing book amongst so many amazing things. I want to talk about Glendian. She is a character that, I just found fascinating. And, it was kind of an example of, and that whole section with Glendian and Arathon, it really, I feel like, those moments show what Arathon's willing to do to protect people, what he's willing to do to be a good person. He basically was willing to go along with a false attempted rape charge, right? to keep Glendian's husband away from battle, from being killed. Like, I mean, like it just, but the whole thing with her, I just thought it was a neat element of the book, and I just thought that her interactions with Erathon, it just, we see so much about Erathon's characters through Erathon's morality through other characters, and I just thought that was a wonderful part, of the book. With her husband wanting to swear fealty to Erathon, and essentially, the crown, Erathon's rule of Rathlane. And I just thought that whole part was just incredible. When Erathon's amongst the clans, we see how close he is, obviously, to the clans, because they are close to the Paradians. They're linked to the Paradians. And we see him, we always see him doing something dynamic that really brings out who he is, right? And I love that part. What do people think about the whole Glendian stuff?
I was we're kind of in the middle, just because the whole thing, I'm like, that was one of the times that Erathon, I'm like, Erathon, I know you've got the compassion, and I know you kind of can't help it, but I'm like, that's too much, man. Come on. It's one of those times it's just like, yelling at the TV, but the book in this case, I'm like, you can't just keep offering to, give up everything. And I know you're gonna keep doing it, but it was definitely one of those things. But it was an interesting character, the way she was set up, and just it's offered something kind of different and some different approaches, and also made a lot of those things possible. And just the idea too of somebody from a different royal line, who's not of Rithane, then swearing to him is something really interesting too. And you can just kind of feel like that's a big deal. Even Erathon's like, I'm not your prince. What are you talking about? This is like, and more to come with it as well. But just, yeah, it was really interesting. Added some very different dynamics, and it's the whole time too. I'm just just thinking, poor oh, now I'm blanking on the name. Um, it's too early. Um, my favorite choreothane, who's somebody bail me out.
Valera?
Come on.
Valeria?
Yes.
Valeria?
Thank you. I'm like, why is my mind gone? But I'm just thinking, poor her the whole time.
Yeah, Erathon always finds himself, because women are attracted to him. We and not that, and obviously she was in some way, for the most part, playing a game trying to save her husband. But at the same time, I don't doubt that, I mean, she was drawn to Erathon because that's what happens. But I just found it really interesting that Janny used, this was a woman who was using her attractiveness, her sexual powers in a certain way, but yet that wasn't just, she wasn't just, a trollop. That was it. She's very bright. She's very determined. But the passion, like that passionate nature, that mercurial, passionate, it just, I love characters like that. They're just this ball of energy. They just come in, they just cause chaos, and then they kind of, other people kind of have to clean up the mess. Like I love characters like that. And of course, she does play a critical role in a lot of things that are positive. So, but I love chaotic characters that they kind of come in and kind of turn things upside down. And yeah, I absolutely loved her character.
How about the cake scene with Dame Dower? Talk about a chaos character. Nobody talks about the cake scene.
I do absolutely love her as a character so much. Every time she's on screen, I had a great time. It's ever since she's been introduced. Yeah, there's so many things to talk about for sure in this book. That's where it's like, even with the long streams, it's hard. But uh, she has to be one of my favorite side characters, just because it never fails to just be absolutely golden when she shows up.
Yeah. I said that last time. I can't remember which book I said that about, but yeah, like And I love those characters that are a bit older. They have the life experience. They're a bit hardened. They're a bit crusty. They're gonna tell you like it is. They have no filter. They're running circles around you. You have no idea. I absolutely love those characters. And when a book has a character like that, I can't help but be drawn to them. Again, like, and obviously not the same level. I'm not the same kind of level of writer as Janny Wurts, but immediately they'll remind me of old Yadwall in my novels, and so I immediately had an affinity for her. So yeah, and she's a powerhouse, and I love to see powerful female characters that you think you're gonna mess with them, especially who's someone you think, okay, she's more of a frail, like, you don't know the metal that is beneath that woman, right? And that's what I love about her character.
I hope you got a laugh out of all of her warmongering sons being strapped down to eat cake and be civilized, and their wives are sticking them with forks under the table. There are dark scenes in this book, but there should be some just tear-jerking humor too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I told in the beginning. This book was fun for me because of these scenes, sprinkled throughout the books, especially I don't know, somehow first half, I found like, okay, this is a fun book, it looks like. Obviously, it took a turn halfway through, but still, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Okay, out of all the books that I've read till now, this was like so much fun. Like, there was humor and there was this playfulness, and out of nowhere it's coming on, and there are serious things going on, but at the same time these things happening as well. So really good. Yeah, I
And the
actually just,
pacing.
yeah, go
Sorry, go ahead,
ahead.
Angie. Oh, I was just gonna say, and the pacing from the first chapter, it just comes at you quick, very
Yeah,
fast, and it sets the scene for the sorry, it sets the pacing for the rest of the story. Like, you're immediately thrown into the action. Like, by the end of the first chapter, you immediately go to the next chapter. I'm like, oh my god, I need to see what's going to happen. And that's basically the pacing for, like, at least the first half. And then when it turns in the second half, pace slows down a little bit until that finale. But no, from beginning to end, it was awesome.
You know what? I have to get this in. I apologize. I may be totally remiss in saying this. This cover is absolutely stunning, and I know people can't see, but this is Arathon sitting in Davian's library, and people would think that this is Lysier, but it's actually Davian projecting himself as Lysier. And I thought this was like, when I read that whole part, I want to drop the book, like, this is genius, right? And to see Arathon tested, and to see Davian test him that way, right? Like, I think this is one of the elements of the book that perhaps gets overlooked, but you realize that initially I was like, what the hell? Like, and then of course, is this like, okay, I thought he's not just gonna lay waste to everything. Like, is this going to be one of those moments where someone's going to die, or like, but when I realized Arathon's ability to restrain himself, that really, like, Arathon, the one thing that he doesn't, perhaps people don't give him enough credit for, is his discipline, right? He's extremely disciplined, right? The compassion and all of it, but this is someone who, I don't. There's characters you think of that are impetuous and that just reactive, but this is someone who really has the ability to control, to a certain extent, emotions. Yes, you see him passionate, you see him angry, you see him get mad at things, you see him, explode people. But this is someone who has supreme and superb discipline in, and that test, like, Janny, I don't like. Wow, you had me like, whoa, like, and the fact that Davian would do that, right? Like, that just shows you that Davian's a shit disturber, and he, it's part of, like, yes, there was a purpose behind the test. I'm not trying to say that, but I felt like Davian was taking pleasure in a lot of ways in that test, and I don't know if that's how you wrote it, but wow, that moment for me is like, oh my god.
Davian's like a bull in a in a China store. he likes to cause. He likes to, stir the pot, or bang on the hornet's nest, so to speak. That's just what he does. But there's a method to the madness. Is all I'll say.
So there was this one section, I think it was towards middle of the book, wherein the Phelan is next to Arithon, and she she feels that he's different. So obviously, even Dakar also sees something different, like a different aura around him and all that. But there's this one passage which describes how Phelan feels about Arithon, and she says like, okay, as the gusting wind slammed the ship through the swell, Phelan experienced the taut weight of him, close knit, compact, nothing like the easy, protective warmth she enjoyed with the mate. This man was different. The intimate sense of his aliveness suffused her, an electrical tingle that coursed through her being and wakened a startling ripple of pleasure. The encounter was sensual and something far more, a contact that quickened the vault of her mind, then hurled a soundless, ranging cry through the uncharted realm of her spirit. I mean, I know what it feels like when I'm reading it, when I finish reading the passage, but if you ask me to repeat it and explain it to somebody, I would fail miserably. And that's where I'm coming back to the point where Thiel said that how can Janny write like that? I mean, we feel these, but you cannot put in words, and she does it so well. It's just a small example. I was so captivated by this passage.
Yeah, if you were someone who, like, there are times where it's it's not just the emotional moment of the actual thing that happens that moves you to almost tears. It's the writing, right? It's the beauty of the writing. And I tell you, like, that is, that's why I think, man, you people who are raving about this series, that you are missing out unless you've read these books. You're truly missing out on something special. So, but yeah, that was a beautiful passage that you read, Angie. Thank you for reading that.
Oh yeah, just so many. The writing is just wonderful and beautiful and amazing, and there are just so many times you'll just read something and just be like, man. And I've done that a bunch. It's sometimes like starting a chapter, or just getting to a section, then I just like pause and I'm like, I'm gonna read that bit again because it's just so nice. And that's where it's Janny's, if she's been telling us all the time that she wrote the story with the words that it needed to be written with, in the exact way. And I feel like that goes for not just all of the important things, but also just the descriptions, the way things are written. It gives, I feel like, the exact feel she wants it to. Um, and so it just, yeah, it's so much control and beauty at the same time in the writing and the story.
Yeah, and then the magic system also, right? The way it's not just simply like, okay, there is a material or element and metal, and the magic works this way. It's not like that. There is depth and layers to the magic, and inside that world, it sounds plausible, or like, okay, scientific, like, it feels like Janny makes you feel like, okay, this sounds very plausible in this world, the vibration of the elements and the, I don't know, like, frequencies, and how music affects, and you feel like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, that explains. Okay, and then that explains what happened in three books away, right? That the whole thing is so layered and connected. So I think the magic system sometimes get uh, underplayed, or even I don't see many people talk too much about magic system in this book, but I think that itself needs a separate, I think, live show or something, because it's so much to discuss, I think. And I read a review of Curse, I think, where somebody was complaining that the magic system was like not explained or not understandable. That's because you cannot understand in book one already, because it is, how do I say that? It's distributed across the book, right? You have to read the series and slowly understand how each and everything works within that world so well. And with each book, I'm understanding more and more about, like, for example, when I started off, I didn't know what is the law of major balance was. So I was like wondering about many decisions many characters took. Like, for example, why did the Fellowship sorcerers just run away after a particular scene in book one? Like, why can't they stay back and help? But then later on, when you know about the law of major balance, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's why they didn't interfere, right? So there are so many things like that. And I think even until I finish the last book, I don't think I can comprehensively say that, okay, I understand the magic system completely, I think, because it's still being revealed and developed along the way.
It's a
It's
good
still
call.
developing. It will continue to develop to all the way through to the finale. You haven't seen it all. One fine point that I might want to point out here is there's a difference between the law of the compact and the law of the major balance. The law of the major balance is that you do not do anything with another consciousness without permission, without free will. And that is universal. So when the fellowship doesn't interfere with Lysair under the law of the major balance, it's because Lysair made a choice, and they will not intervene until it threatens the compact. The compact law is the agreement by which mankind was given settlement. And this is not a spoiler at this stage. So Lysair was cast outside of the compact, which means he does not have fellowship, intercession, or protection between him and the Paravians. He's basically on his own with no person to stand between. So he's no longer protected under the agreement that allowed mankind to settle. It's not a safe agreement. The fellowship could have to act to protect it, and it would not be pretty. But the law of the major balance is free will. So if they're not interfering with Lysair right now, it's because free will, until it reaches a certain point. And then they would have to act, because their primary directive is the protection of the Paravians and their survival, which means ultimately the balance of the planet, because without that, the Paravians cannot be there. So if that makes sense. There's a long appendix in the end of this book, if you have the hardback version, that goes into some of these things. If you don't have this version, the hardback version of the book, don't worry, because I was able to repeat that appendix in Storm Fortress. So the print version of Storm Fortress, even the tiny paperback, has all that information included there.
Yeah,
Oh,
I noticed that. I think in this one, I'm like, ooh, extra information, which is always great. But I mean, Angie, I feel like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head, because the magic system in these books, it doesn't really feel like a magic system like we think about it. I think a lot of the time, it's just there's so much magic, and the more you find out about it, the more it makes sense. But then there are so many facets of it too, with how music affects it, how nature affects it, how the electromagnetic currents of the earth are so relevant and important. And there are so many different bits and pieces with the magic system. And then at the same time, you think you finally kind of know what's going on, and then you start, you introduce Paravians into the mix, and you're like, oh nope, there's still so much more going on here. It's that kind of the slow build, finding out more and more, like you said too. It's uh, a fantastic way to just explore and discover the world.
Yeah, I agree with so much with Shibapo. Shibapo is an amazing person, and such a big, influencer, and someone who is a wealth of knowledge, about Janny's work and writing. Such a incredible fan, and just someone who helps educate us all on her writing. But yeah, I really love what he says there, that which says you don't need an exhaustively detailed manual that the characters read from whenever magic comes up. The proper fixation on hard magic is such a pain. I feel the same. I know a lot of people don't like. Listen, if you can love writers like Brandon Sanderson and love their incredibly intricate and detailed upfront to the last thing magic system where everything is explained pretty well as you go. That while I appreciate Brandon Sanderson for how he writes and I appreciate her, that's not my preference. I prefer things to kind of organically. I don't need to know everything. I'm not fixated on knowing every single little thing about everything. As a matter of fact, I prefer the mysteries. I like to not know how something works until later. I like it to be revealed to me throughout the course of a series. I don't need to know, you know, I love exactly. It's magic. If stuff never gets explained, that's fine. I love that. Chivapo. Like, yeah, but that's me. That's my personal taste. For some people, they want that analogous to straight up science. This plus this equals it. But Janny has all that. The difference is that you just don't see it all right away, right? It's all there, right? You start off from, hey, ooh, we're in a splinter world. Like, because we're not focused on these things. We're so caught up in the story and the prose, blah blah. But it's all there, right? It's just that it doesn't get revealed all at once, and you're not told exactly. Well, this means that this will happen, and this and for me, I agree with Shibapol so much. I don't need that, right? I can read a Janny's magic system is detailed down to the last iota. However, it's just not all revealed up front. But even so, I wouldn't need that to love this book, right? And I'm fine with soft magic systems. I'm fine with area. Listen, Lord of the Rings, right? Nobody knows how much power Gandalf has, what he can do, what the consequences are, why he does it. But guess what? It's okay, right? So, but that said, again, Janny's, as Angie so aptly hinted to, Janny's magic system, yeah, like there's science involved, right? Electromagnetic fields and yeah. So, anyways, that was some amazing stuff by Chivapo.
What makes the magic system great is that it's so. I mean, there's science behind it, but it's so mysterious, and you can't wrap. I couldn't wrap my head around the whole impact of it, which is what made it so wonderful. From the lanes and what the fellowships are using through that, through the Coriani and the crystals and and their gems and what's going on with that, the necromancy and even like the brief times we've seen the Paravians and what influence they can have on everything. It just keeps building and building, and you realize how grand the whole experience of the magic is. That it just works. Like I like some stories that have like a define. Okay, this is this for this. Like Brandon Sanderson and his Mistborn, like with all the medals and stuff like that. There's a place for that, and a lot of people enjoy that. But in a series of this scale and this scope, I just want to be just absorbed in the wonder of it. I don't need everything spelled out for me. I want to try to figure it out on my own. And if I want help, I'll ask for help. Like this is the one of the series you're so absorbed in it in trying to understand everything that you just let the magic and the words just flow. And that's what's so beautiful with the prose, especially when Jenny's talking about like the music part of it. And Arathon, he's doing the lyrics and just the writing of it and how what it means and the emotion and just in some cases like the gut punch of what has to happen. It works so well together. Can't think of another author who's done something like this.
Yeah, and it's for me, I tend to be kind of more in the middle with magic systems because I can appreciate a good hard magic system and I can appreciate soft too. But I like there to be something in the middle because if it's like the super soft where it's just gonna be Deus ex machina every time we need something, we're just gonna magic our way out, that tends to annoy me. But the combination that we have in this series is crazy because it starts out seeming like this is a very soft magic system that the magic's just going to do whatever it needs to do, and we find out that that could not be further from the truth because there are so many rules. And then the way you start to really see and comprehend just the barest bit of the Fellowship's power as well. I loved some of the lines that Janny wrote in the past few books, where it's like the Fellowship sorcerer doing this, like they could have done this, but instead they just made a slight breeze. And it's really looking at it and seeing how much power they have. And then even then you're like, oh, so they're just like all powerful. But no, they also have all of these rules. There are also specific reasons they have that kind of power. And it's I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I've ever read anything that manages to pair science, like hard science, and also the wonder of the softest magic system. Like it's such a combination. It still feels incredibly magical because it is pure magic, despite the fact that there are also a lot of rules and specifics and a science to it. And that combination is just wonderful. And as somebody who kind of sits in the middle where I want a little bit of both, it works perfectly for me.
Yeah, true. So, Janny, you have some extra material for us to read out because Blaze, you have like limited time, right? So that's why I would really love to get into that because I'm really looking forward to what Janny has got for us today.
Always look forward to it.
Yeah.
I brought you a little bit of the Third Age history, only Third Age, of necromancy on Ethera and the evolution of the Grey Kralavir cult. Starting in about age third year 460, renegade Coriathane and hedge practitioners form a cult dedicated to perfecting human longevity. The first rites developed a blend of Bidar rites of ancestry, blood magic, and ritual death, entrapping animal magnetism and magnifying the energies through a gemstone focus. So the entrapment was the Coriathane's idea. Enslavement, murder, and violation of free will all transgressed charter law, and the use of Etheran jewels alerted the Centaur Guardian at Althane Tower, who referred the infractions to Fellowship of Seven oversight and Crown Justice. So you realize at this time, the Centaur Guardian at Althane Tower held the Earthlink. Seth Veer did not until 5100. He was not what he is now at this time. In Third Age 461, necromancy was formally forbidden by charter law. Practitioners are run down for prosecution. Third Age 462, the first cult Kresh was destroyed and cleansed by white matchfire, with the survivors condemned to exile through Southgate, where the low resonance nature of the splinter worlds will emasculate magical practice. Eventual evolution, the exiled cultists turn their fanatical pursuit towards technological development. Remnant knowledge still existed on Ethera. Therefore, if 5 High Kings are set on notice, then any further development of dark practice or necromancy is a priority offense and requires intervention. 815, rubies cut at Imarnardair, which is on the splinter world of Dasaneller, which was once Merith, were acquired by necromancers. So these were off-world rubies, not from Ethera, which allowed them a layer of masking secrecy for their deviant rites. In 901, a purge of necromancy by Fellowship and High Kings, but not all of them were rounded up. Pocket enclaves lie low. Not all of the Adair rubies are recovered. Now, if you remember, the Dragon Skull wards had rubies in them. Bingo. 915. Grey Cult Kralavir is established at Erdane. The sect stirs from underground secrecy, revived by survivors and copied grimoires. They exist in the shadows under town law's domain and evolve a particularly virulent practice of Kralavir necromancy called the Grey Folk. They begin by using animals to keep their workings beneath notice. 4132. High Crown Council of Sovereigns, led by Camridian's Phalanis Praevian liaison, successfully conclude the negotiation of open passage where grant of road rights are given for several passes, allowing trade to land route over the ranges. Darkling through the northern Skyshills or land through the Thaldanes, Redburn to Quaid through the store lanes in Havistock are granted, but Matherns and the Bayan Gap remain forbidden to mankind's use. And I will stop there. because I don't want to go into spoiler territory, but that's at least letting you know how far back these roots go and some of the really creepy stuff that went underground. And this is sort of a surface overview. There is, of course, a lot more between these lines. This was just what I set up to show you for today. So yeah, it's a really pretty nasty bunch of people. So the little hints dropped here were little things like the rubies in those dragon skull wards, the little things like how the stuff was hidden underground, to understand the difference between town law and free wilds law, and then the compact law. There were tiers. So the towns basically have free will. They can do whatever they want as long as it doesn't rock the boat. So pretty ugly stuff can go on in the towns as long as it doesn't reach outside of that. Free wilds law goes a whole bigger step further. You're much more subject to oversight outside of that territory of where a town law and sovereign law is over top of town law. If the sovereign law needs to intervene, it can, but it would generally not. And this is one of the reasons why you see the Coriathane very seldom venture out of the towns.
I've also noticed that everything bad. Well, everything bad. A lot of bad things seem to happen in the towns. Obviously, there is encroaching upon the wilds, and they're persecuted by the townspeople. However, the really bad things that happen, for the most part, I'm not talking about the battles between, the clans. I'm talking about like the evil things that happen, the bad things, the bad seeds, as you said, that sprout, happen in the towns and major cities of your world in Athera, Jane. And I, having read up to the point I've read, I'm gonna guess that that's only gonna continue in the final book.
It isn't because the town people are inherently bad or towns are inherently bad. It's because when people say people have no free will on Athera, that's not quite true. They do. Within town law, they have a great deal of it, if not most of it. As long as they don't threaten the planetary balance, they can pretty much do almost whatever they want, barring certain things, necromancy being one. But to a degree, until it really rocks the boat or it surfaces, it can be left. And the only person really permitted to intervene with town law is the high kingships, which are not there. And the only one that can intervene with a high kingship really is the Fellowship of Seven. So you can see there's a controlled set of checks and balances to give mankind their own destiny within certain limits that won't upset the balance of the world. So you don't know this at the beginning of the book. You're going to say, oh, this is tyranny, this is this is that, but you don't understand the structure and what it's saving or what it's preserving and what it's defending until you get to this stage in the series. And then you begin to start seeing how everything interlocks together and how mankind does have destiny within certain limits. They have a great deal of destiny, and that entire picture is not in view yet either. That's going to come out as you go further. But you can see why I did not put those appendices in book one.
Yeah. No.
So, yeah, and Chippy Poe brought up a fantastic question in the chat, which also was something that stood out to me, is them being exiled through Southgate, which is where Adeshthir came from. But then I also, did you say that Dax and Euler used to be Merrick? Or did I mishear that? Because that, I thought I heard you say that too, and I'm like, that also brings me up questions.
Actually, Dasaneller and Rasenpasi, the Red Desert World, are different worlds. Excuse me, I conflated. So the place where the rubies were mined was Rasenpasi, which is the desert world that's in between. And there's a reason why there's a Thera, and then there's a dead, dry desert world, and then there's an ocean world. There's a reason for that. It's not necessarily huge bearing on this story. So I didn't exactly include it, though. As you read the full series, you'll sort of see why that was done. But there's nothing done here that was arbitrary. And as far as Chibico goes, question, the Gray Book of Olgek it recorded bloodlines. It recorded those clan bloodlines that were able to survive Paravian contact. So it kept track of which ones were going to survive. So that is a record at Althane Tower. But no, the Grey Book of Albeck has nothing to do with either necromancy or the origins of Deshthar. Those are two separate things. The Grey Book of Albeck is clan lineages. And of course, in this book, I believe it was mentioned or somewhere that the Coriathane got their hands on that. Why? Because they wanted those lineages that were a little bit more amenable to magic, being able to use magic.
I just want to quickly say something. This is something that I really wanted to discuss, but it skipped my mind. So I think just towards the beginning of the book, my favorite part of the book is this one. You might not agree with me, but this is the part where kind of felt like science fiction, reading science fiction or space, I don't know, battle or something, where Asander, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, he, what do you call that? He separates himself from his body, and then he's in a virtual space battle. I didn't see that coming, and I enjoyed that so much. I reread that passage that whole part so many times. I really, really loved it. The way it was written, it was beautiful, and I loved it because I didn't expect anything like that happening here. So this something out of Ethera that's happening somewhere, and he says that he can see the planet behind, like a small pale dot. And I was like, oh, that is cool. I really like it. I want more of this. That was
That's
my favorite part.
This is why I love doing the live shows, especially now that I've read ahead, because I'm like, there's so many fantastic things, and then like you'll bring something up like that, like yes, because just like visualizing those scenes was just so cool. And yeah, I mean, like it literally is a space battle, a magic space battle. I mean, not something I would have expected, but also just more stuff that kind of really shows the scope too. And I feel like that's another thing that just makes you really see, like, yeah, like I mean, this is more than just like, oh, it's a normal magic world and we have the gates. It's like, no, like they're going into space to fight things that are coming into space. Like, how cool is that in fantasy? Like, it just is super cool. And yeah, totally agree. Loved those bits.
Have you read Sundering Star yet, Angie? That'll give you a bigger taste of.
Oh, can I read it already now? Without reading the rest of the book? Okay.
Yes, please.
Angie, just I don't know what to say about Sundering Star. Just get ready to have your mind blown. That's all.
It's 25 pages, but
yeah.
it'll blow your mind with
Yeah.
once you finish it once and looking back of what it means and entails. That's all I'll say on that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm not saying anymore.
I don't know if you've seen this, but I read Gallant and I did a 5 minutes review of that. I was mind blown. I wasn't expecting. I cried so much.
Yeah, that book will bring you to tears. There was a deep dive. I think it was Philip's channel or Joanna's channel.
Group, yeah.
Janny, I can't remember. It was Janny, myself, Philip, Joanna. That book. Yeah, if that book doesn't make you cry, I don't know what will. Like that book is just so. And I mean, not everybody. I'm a romance fan. Not everybody is, but the romance in that book is just so poignant. It's just like, yeah.
I don't like.
Go read it.
This is like, if you give me romance like this, I will start reading romance. This is how you write romance. Like, this is how you write for adults, right? Oh God, that was so moving.
Yeah, it was extremely moving. Like, wow, yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful book.
I don't like romance too much either, but that one just in the Gallant. I actually just reread it. It did. It brought me to tears reading that. And speaking of pulling at your heartstrings, this is the last thing I wanted to talk about. If regards to Traitor's Knot is Elaine and her journey in this book couldn't be two opposite ends of the spectrum from beginning to end. The first one, she's distraught when she learns about the truth about what happened with Talith. and with her son Kavor, and her getting away from the influence of the High Councils, and it turns out the necromancers, to the escape from the Fellowship on was it Methyl, or like the fortress, and then her going to Ath the Ath Brotherhood hostel, and seeing her son not as she knew him, but reborn, and he's something more. And from the Ath Brotherhood, that's their first person who's been accepted in over 100 years. And when she stands there with Lysair and Sulfin looking on, uh, she refuses to go back with him because she uh, knows the truth. She makes the decision that she can't live with herself based on what is going on around him. Can't live with him. And then Lysair's Kavor, when he talks to Lysair and says, offers him redemption a third time, and a third time he rejects it. He and that leads him on a pathway. He learns that the three boys, what they call the Zabridin men, helped, or the oldest one helped, or wanted to help Talitha escape ultimate betrayal and the setup going into Storm Fortress. So that scene, uh, Olene's journey is just tears at your heartstrings. Then you feel good for her um, towards the end, and then but that has repercussions because it ultimately leads to Storm Fortress, and then that's the ultimate setup. So that's just what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that was such a powerful scene with that kind of showdown between them, and there was a character too that wasn't like a huge focus, but that I just really felt for because she was in such an impossible position, and then just seeing that, but then yeah, the showdown with Lysair was just like, I'm like, oh man, this is like whatever happens from this as I'm reading, I'm like, this is not gonna be good. Like this is gonna be really bad. And it does set up the impetus just for the next book, but even just it was such a tense scene. Beautiful scene, so tense as well.
Yeah, that was amazing. I guess my final comment, I'd mentioned this out of the things that stuck out. I want to talk about Jensia. This is someone who really young. She's coping with the horrible death of Jarrett and what happened there. She blames Arathon. Um, you know, Arathon, he basically, makes her, fight him, and then puts a blood oath of protection, uh, on her but that's what Jared asked him to do. He asked him to, and then Jensa, she storms out, right, and she's totally now anti Arathon. She's kind of in that fin, sorry, in that in that realm of like Theon. She doesn't understand what's happening. She doesn't understand Arathon. She doesn't understand what's really going on. And because she doesn't understand that ignorance causes her to hate him, right? But on top of that, she blames him for her father's death, essentially. Although, as a Cathian, she's not understanding quite what her role is, the totality of it. And she's young, and she's very volatile. She's very fiery, and those are all positive traits because Cathians have to test their high kings, but at the same time, she isn't channeling that the right way yet. But I love what this is setting up for future books with her, and what happens, especially in Storm Fortress. But yeah, I want to point to her character as a very pivotal one. Janny doesn't include characters that aren't pivotal, as I said before, but I am now really honing in on, I always have, but Janny's female characters and what they do to affect broad, sweeping events. And she's one of the ones that stood out for me in this book. So that's my final kind of what I want to say about generally the spoiler section.
So I'll jump into that range for my final comment too, because that's made me start thinking about too something that is really interesting about this book, and we'll continue to see it. But James is, I feel like, important because that showcases the fact that if you really look at it and think about it, the clans, the current clans, they don't really know Arathon for the most part. Like there are very few people who've ever spent time with him, and a fair amount of time has passed. And I mean, when you think about it, James is the father of somebody who in book one was like 12, and it's seeing these things and seeing that the clans, even them, even the clans, they're in a situation where all they know is that they're killed for this prince that they don't even know. And so although it's easy to, and I'll admit I was, James annoyed me with that. I'm like, come on. But at the same time, I understand it because she, all she sees is her father and others go off and die for the cause of a man. And even the clans are kind of at the point where like they almost hate Arathon. And so it's so easy to see, how the townspeople that and everybody who's been riled up by Lysair can feel it, because even the clans are to an extent at this point we're like, hey, are you really worth it at this point? And it makes it so powerful because it's more than just like they're like she's mad. It's more than that. It's such a deeper thing, and it's so understandable. And it's kind of, Arathon is not the easiest person to give the benefit of the doubt from an outside perspective. As the reader, we see all of these things, but it's just another reminder that from the outside perspective of these characters, he's difficult to get along with and to give the benefit of the doubt to. So I really like the way that that's handled, because even though we're usually given a fairly sympathetic view of Arathon, many of the characters and the majority of people in the books, I would say, are not. They're given these different narratives, and so seeing how these different narratives can develop and evolve over time too is just fascinating. And so I love that with the complexity of the characters. I
Right.
tried to keep final thoughts short.
Well, my final thoughts before I share. Blaze, you want to share something here?
No, I already said my final thoughts on the Elaine part, and all additional I'll say is that um, this book, Traitor's Not in particular, everything that was on the page already, like leading up to this, it just flows out so naturally, and then going into Storm Fortress to finish this arc, every emotion you have will be splurred out of you, and I mean that in all sincerity, all parts of the spectrum. So you're in for something really, 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 really special. So just to build up the excitement. And one more thing, because I know Paul talked about this earlier, Janny's not given enough credit for her battle scenes. Storm Fortress, I mean, obviously, this is not spoiling anything, but there's obviously a battle, and it's one of the best ones in all of fantasy. Period. There's no discussion.
I
Although we'll
totally
talk
agree. Totally agree. One of the
It
best.
may or may not be a fortress that is stormed.
it may not be, but
Yeah.
we'll leave it at that.
One of the best battle sequences, sieges. Sieges are something that you'll see in many fantasy books. So without spoiling, yeah, one of the best ever written, without question. And I've read a lot of them. So
For me, like I said, this was a fun book. It had everything I want in a good, entertaining book. And characters, even the new characters, the side characters, Fion and Sulfin, they all were. I mean, everybody are getting an arc and a role, I love, like I said, certain scenes like the Ascenders scene, like the space battle scene, and some of my favorite scenes are from this book. And um, I remember for the first time I was so happy when I when I see the what's her name, Glendia. Yeah, so she, I mean, the
Really?
female characters, the way the female characters are written, it's just getting better and better. I mean, I'm just cannot wait to get to the next book. And I have to say that kudos to Janny for writing this book with so much humor and fun. Like I cannot stop saying that, because the first part where the Yats are creating all these uh, problem and how it backfired on the enchantresses, the how how hilarious was that, like how it backfired. So this dark humor, I couldn't get enough of it. It's wonderful. So yeah, really looking forward to the next book in the series.
You'll be happy to know it starts exactly 5 seconds after the ending of Traitors Not. So it goes right into it, and it's not going to let up the pace, not by 1 inch.
I'm so excited for you to read it, Angie. Like I even like I've
Same.
read the books now, but I eagerly look forward to these conversations still, and to see what you think and to chat with everybody else. So it's I kept I joked with all of them, and they gave me some crap about it because as I was reading, I would get so focused on reading, I would forget to like chat with anybody about anything in the book. I'm like, I'm so
That's
focused.
yeah, that's my problem. That's why I'm never active on Discord. I see all this discussion going on. I don't know, maybe I have ADHD or something. I get overwhelmed with the number of messages. That's number one. And secondly, when I'm reading a book, I want to finish it and then discuss, but that by then I would have forgotten so many points. So I never engage while I'm reading the book. Yeah, but I'm starting with Sundering Star today, so let's see how that goes. Hopefully the review will be up in as soon as I finish it. Yeah.
You'll finish it
Just
in no time.
hold Storm Fortress until after, hold Black Bargain until after Storm Fortress.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
only
Okay,
one,
okay.
pretty much where you are now. You could read any of the shorts. Just wait for the end of Arc 3 for that one.
Will do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just want to quickly, I know we're wrapping up, but Jenny, thank you so much for writing this incredible series. It's enriched my life in so many ways. You know, this is something, as I said before, as an author, it makes me want to write so much better. When I read your writing, I go, oh boy, do I have a long way to go? And obviously, every author has their own style, has their own, brings their own talents to the table. But just as a general sense, as a piece of art, as a writer, someone who appreciates, great writers and great writing. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me something that has brought me so many hours of enjoyment. And it's nice having a favorite, and it's nice having when people ask me about, Paul, can you recommend your favorite series, your something that, and obviously it's straight to Janny, right? But there is there's I don't have enough superlatives to done rewriting. Right now your book's at the top of my shelf, obviously closest to me, but I anticipate to have to clear another shelf or buy one because there's so much for you I haven't read at all, and so much. The beauty of your body of work is that there's so many books that I still have to look forward to. But this series in itself, if I wasn't sold, and who could not be after starting this series, then obviously I quickly, started to look at you as definitely an iconic writer who, again, I keep mentioning for those of you watching and you're kind of on the fence. I know it's a big series. Like, oh, well, I've read Wheel of Time. Well, you should read this. I've read Malazan. If you've read those series, then how can you not read this series? Is kind of my question to you. So, anyways, that's all I want to say.
Right. Awesome.
Since I have no editor at this point that's read this, you guys are my advocates, so I'm immensely grateful that you're there for it. because right now, absolutely not too much is happening. So you're making it the wheel turn. And it was one of the hardest moments going through with this, writing it when almost no one had heard of it. And the fact that, you don't want to compare yourself to other series. You don't want to compare yourself to other authors. You can't, because the minute you do, you're unhappy. But I always imagined when I started this that I would have a fan base that would be speculating what was coming next, that would be talking about this, that would be excited about waiting for the next book. And it was like dropping a rock into a still pool. So you guys are making up for that now. Better late than never. And now it's all complete. So we get to all watch and see new people discover this. So that's very exciting. So thank you very much for being here today, for taking your time, for putting your enthusiasm out there, because it justifies the feeling that I knew I had this huge thing. I knew I had to write a long forward work. I knew I had to do it exactly the way it was done. I knew that there were some very special things to me that I was putting into these books. And to see other people sharing that is very heartwarming for me at this time.
And we very much appreciate you writing it
Yeah.
and coming to spend so much time with us too. When starting to read these books and loving it, I never imagined that I would get to once a month sit and talk with you, Janny, and the rest of you who are fantastic and have had just an amazing time. But never thought I'd just get to spend hours chatting to one of my favorite authors. So it's a super cool feeling. And Angie, you set up this entire thing as well, and I probably would. It's entirely possible that I'd still be reading the series and wouldn't have gone through, like I said, if you wouldn't have
Oh yeah.
invited me to these, because you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to be on schedule now, and and just yeah, and Blaze and PL, it's super great having your insight and everything as well. So I enjoyed the heck out of these. I look forward to them every month, and I'm really looking forward to the next few as well, because there's so many things to talk about.
Yeah, quickly, Blaze, man, Blaze is someone who is another. Talk about Janny being an underrated author. Blaze is an underrated, blogger and force for good in terms of promoting works that are under the radar. And he's the one that got me onto this series, and I have not looked back. He's the one that basically talked about what an amazing person Jenny was in terms of being a writer. And of course, now I'm on to call Jenny a friend. And Blaze, man, thank you so much for all you do in the community to promote books like this, who, should be mentioned in the pantheon of amazing, amazing, amazing top fantasy books. Right. And Angie, yeah, you are, again, another underrated blogger. But Angie, you're so wonderful. You're so sweet. Thank you so much for arranging this. This is amazing. I'm privileged to be on this with you and Nico and Blaze and Jenny. This is a real highlight for me and a treat, right? I'm honored to be asked and included. So
Yeah,
Thank you
before
so
I
much.
thank everybody, I want to shout out to Shibipo for being such an amazing person, such an amazing expert in this series. So whenever I have a question, and she's always, always there answering giving me answers. So we all, I'm sure, really, really appreciate Shibipo and the contributions to this series. And Janny, again, thank you so much for writing this wonderful book. And like you said, we are all glad that you didn't get discouraged and kept on writing, with conviction. And I'm sure it's going to pay off, because the fandom is only going to grow. That I can guarantee, I think. And we can see that ripple in the booktube community, at least, and it's going to spread sooner. And I am sure I will put all my efforts into spreading the word, especially when we are nearing the release of the final book, which I'm really, really looking forward to. And I can also flex that I have read the arc. I'm waiting for that flex. So, yeah. So,
Yeah, I'll be bragging too.
right? Yeah. Of course. So, thanks everybody for joining. And this has been such an amazing discussion. And every time I want to thank all the viewers as well. I think even though during live there are very few viewers, when I go back and see in a week, there are a lot of people who are watching this content. So a lot of people are getting interested in the series, and I hope it helped them. It helps them to pick up this book and read it, and give it a chance. This series. So that's all for today from us. We'll be back soon with the discussion of the next book in the series, Storm Fortress, very soon. So look forward to that. Thank you for joining. See you soon. Bye bye.